Now, let me just say a bit about how the evening will run. Firstly, each of the candidates here is going to get 3 minutes to kind of introduce themselves and to say a bit about where they're coming from and their policies. So they will do that from the lectern. Then when we have finished that, there were going to be some questions. Now, you've submitted questions in advance, those who've been sifted by those who are wise and thoughtful, to pick out some good questions that represent what people want to explore. And each person will take it in turns to respond to those questions, and they'll have 2 minutes to do that each. And then we're going to end the evening with a 2-minute summary from each of the candidates, again, just to kind of round things off. So that's the idea. We're going to try and keep to the timing. The questions, if your question has been selected, you'll be given your question to ask. Okay, so that will happen from the floor. Now, you will appreciate that in order to hear from the candidates here, we need to do lots of listening. And so there's not a lot of opportunity for audience participation, but I do encourage you to listen to the questions and to listen to the answers that are given. What we're doing this evening is being recorded and will be available on YouTube later in the week. Exciting stuff, eh? The link will be made widely available, not only in the local press, but also through the Churches Together website. So you will be able to see this again if you would like to, or commend it to friends and colleagues if that's helpful. I would just like to say, if you could refrain from taking photographs, that would just be helpful to not be distracting, and there will be some press. The press are here to take some photos anyway, and of course it will all be on YouTube anyway. We need as well to keep applause to a minimum, please, to the end of the evening, because we want to hear from our friends and not take up all the time applauding and stuff. And we want to try and fit in as many questions as possible. And we've already talked before we gathered together, and just wanted to emphasise that the tone of our evening this evening is to listen respectfully to each other. We have different views about things, and that is absolutely fine and to be expected. But what is important is that we listen respectfully to one another, and that can help us then to reach our own conclusions. So, on that note, I'm going to begin by asking Andy if he would like to begin with his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm sure I speak for all the candidates here when I say thank you very much for giving up a few hours of your time to come and listen to us this evening. My name is Andy Croy, and I'm the Labour Party's candidate for Wokingham. Wokingham has changed a lot. My grandma used to say that the best change for her was when the council finally got round to putting tarmac on the Barkham Line. My mum still maintains that Wokingham's character as a small market town changed when the Bean Oak estate was built. And for me, the big change was the loss of Martin's, our open-air swimming pool. For my son, well, he was absolutely delighted when Nando's came. He's horrified about the cost of renting and the amount of deposit he'll have to raise when he leaves home, but Nando's arriving was a key moment in his life. So I hope that no one will deny that my passion for things local is not a political passion, but it's a deep, visceral, gut-wrenching passion. I wish I could stand here and say that by electing me, you will be able to solve all of Wokingham's local challenges. We are lucky. We have a small army of charitable volunteers who try to mitigate our problems. Wade has been working with the elderly in Wokingham for as long as I can remember. First Days provides amazing support for young families. The Salvation Army provides practical support to our homeless residents. Wokingham Food Bank takes the edge off of the poverty into which some of our families may slip. While your next MP may be expected to sympathise with local issues, the MP will not have the cash to distribute or local executive power. The real importance of your next MP lies in how they represent you in Parliament and their contribution to the direction of travel which this country takes over the next 5 years. So let us briefly remind ourselves of what a Tory MP and his Liberal Democrat allies in Parliament have done for the people of Wokingham. They have introduced a bedroom tax, which overwhelmingly hits disabled people. They have increased VAT to 20%. a tax which hits those on lowest incomes the hardest. They have given tax breaks to millionaires, because that is what Tories do. They have raised tuition fees from £3,000 to £9,000 per year, and they have returned the NHS to a state of crisis. The Royal Berks failed to meet its A&E targets for 3/4 of the last year. They took an economy which in 2010 was growing, and they stopped growth in its tracks. They then presided over the worst economic recovery in 100 years, a recovery which has left families in Wokingham £1,600 a year worse off. They had an economic plan that was so successful that after 3 years Britain lost its AAA credit rating. Ladies and gentlemen, Labour has a better plan. We will build an economy that works for everyone and a society that leaves no one behind. This evening, I look forward to sharing elements of that plan with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name's Phil Cunnington, and I'm the UKIP candidate for Wokingham. I very well planned out 3 minutes for what I wanted to say to you this evening, but I'm going to start with something actually that puts everything else that I say and we do in context. I'm friends with and work with a number of Nepalese people in Farnborough. The disaster at the weekend has meant that I've spent the day dealing with people who are in shock at what they have seen and what they've heard from home. So tonight, I want us to be grateful for being British. I want us to be proud of a nation that is prepared to help others. And I want us to look forward and outward to an international view of the world. Me, I'm part of what would be the 2010 revolution, I guess, if there is such a thing, where the membership of UKIP has gone from 4,000 to 45,000 in the last 5 years. Mostly people like me, who've got a lot of experience working, living, travelling, and we've never really found a home, voted Tory, voted Labour, always had to compromise on things that we believe. And I'm here tonight representing UKIP because I found somewhere where I feel it represents the way that I think our country should go. So I want to just mention a small word to you to remember for later. Cross. I could have lived anywhere, actually. I could have lived anywhere in the country when we came back from living and working in Africa. But we chose Wokingham because we thought it was just a great place, and a great place to bring our family up. And so I've got nothing but happy memories from the last 20 years, and look forward to 20 years where I can see a town that I still love. Not one that's dissected month by month by an out-of-control council who doesn't really listen to what people have got to say about what they want. You might think, as has been said, that's not a national issue, it's a local issue. Let me tell you, UKIP have got very good ideas about how we can give people back a say in their community. And it's really important that we get the chance to do that. So I guess I'm looking at change. I guess I'm asking you to think, do we want to just go for the same old story, move from one to the other, never really going anywhere? Or do we want to look forward, and do we want to be proud of a country that can make its way in the world? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn, and thank you very much for coming. My name is Clive Jones. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate. I want to be your MP because I want to live in a fairer society. That means a fairer society for everyone, and only the Liberal Democrats will deliver a fairer society for everyone. In 2010, we were bust. Banks were failing, businesses were failing, universities were in danger of going bust, unemployment was rising, especially for young people, and our public services were in crisis. After the election, no party had a majority of MPs to form a government. The Liberal Democrats didn't want to go into a coalition. We did it to bring stability and benefit to the country. So what have the Liberal Democrats achieved in their 5 years in coalition? Income tax thresholds have increased by £4,000 a year, providing hard-working families with an extra £825 a year. In Wokingham, over 51,000 people have benefited from this policy. That's a Liberal Democrat promise in our manifesto, delivered by Liberal Democrats in government. For pensioners, we introduced a triple lock on the basic state pension. So far, this has provided 16,000 pensioners in Wokingham with an extra £18.30 a week, which is £950 a year. A Liberal Democrat policy delivered by Liberal Democrats in government. We protected the education budget despite opposition from our Conservative colleagues. And we introduced a pupil premium, which has provided Wokingham schools with an extra £4.7 million to spend on disadvantaged children, improving the life chances of those children who are trapped in cycles of deprivation. A Liberal Democrat policy delivered by Liberal Democrats in government. We championed apprenticeship schemes. Nearly 10,000 youngsters in Wokingham have benefited from them. A Liberal Democrat policy delivered by Liberal Democrats in government. We've helped create 1.9 million jobs. Our hospitals now employ an extra 9,600 doctors and 7,500 nurses. I live in Early, which is in the heart of our constituency. My daughters went to local schools and then they went on to university. I've worked in the UK and European toy manufacturing industries for 25 years at a senior level as a director. I know how businesses and commerce work. I want to be your next MP. I want to represent the place where we live. And I want to deliver a fairer society and a stronger economy with opportunity for everyone. Thank you very much.
Hello there, my name is Kaz Lukaczewski, and yes, I've got a Polish name, but I was born and bred in the UK, and I've lived in Wokingham for the last 20 years. My children go to school here. There is something very wrong at the heart of Westminster when an individual responsible for defrauding a nation through currency manipulation faced no jail time and no plea deal to expose the depth of corruption. There is something very wrong with Westminster when offshore companies owned by offshore trusts can hoard UK assets and then rent them back perpetually, leeching out the disposable incomes of our citizens, never to pay tax, while expanding their UK holding with the advantage they have over natives. If usury is to be a sin, then Westminster has become its church. There is also something very wrong with our electoral process, when the only information voters are provided with is self-professed ideology statements and policies which can be scrapped a week later. I'm offering something different. I'm opting in to parliamentary recall. I'm committing to policies that will undermine party politics and return democracy to the people. Policies that will turn elections, both borough and national, into competitions where the most honest person with the best ideas has the advantage, not the best funded gang with the loosest of tongues. Wouldn't it be great if Parliament was full of honest individuals, without a debt to those who funded their campaign, free to support good ideas regardless of which of these parties actually choose them? We can pick and choose the best of what these people here are going to choose today, or to talk about today, and unlike them, I'm willing to give you a vote back guarantee. And the vote gap guarantee is something you need to put any faith in me, because I am still a stranger. I must respect, and we should all respect, that we are still strangers no matter what we say to you. We shouldn't demand that you trust us blindly, and that's where I think the problem has always come from. It's not to say that the other candidates are more susceptible than myself, but I've asked four of the candidates here today in the past to list the policies that they would be willing to commit to supporting before I voted for them, and none of them did. So I had no one worth voting for, in all fairness to myself, and so I stood. There's no downside in voting for me. The policies we like will be raised in Parliament, and supported by my 1 in 600 votes. I hope that by the end of this meeting, the other candidates will step up and agree that you are unable to make an informed choice today in the absence of voter consumer rights. That they will give them to you and prioritise those rights becoming a requirement in future elections. And until they are, all policy promises can be taken with a pinch of salt. It's not like we don't have historical evidence to back that up. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am John Redwood, your Conservative candidate. Uppermost in our thoughts this evening must be the terrible suffering of the people in Nepal. And I'm in contact with my former parliamentary colleagues who remain as ministers in our government, at least until May the 7th, urging them to come up with a strong, robust and generous response. We need to help with rescue and relief, and I hope I speak for all of you tonight in drawing that to their attention and urging it upon them. It has been my privilege over the last 5 years to represent the Wokingham constituency in Parliament. It's been an enormously busy and challenging task, and it's been a good Parliament in some ways for Wokingham. I saw to fruition something I've campaigned a long time for, a new station for Wokingham. I wondered whether we'd ever get it. I've worked with the council, councillors and others to arrange funding and the detailed permissions for 3 new primary schools, which we need. We're now working together on the secondary school. I've been working on noise abatement because it is a bit noisy from transport links around the area. And I'm very pleased to have had the recent support of our Liberal Democrat candidate on some of the noise measures. It is much better if we work together, and it does mean Wokingham has an even more powerful voice when leading political interests can find common cause. And I know there's a lot more to do, so if elected for the next term in Parliament, I would certainly have at the top of my list fairer funding for Wokingham schools. I would have on my list better flood defences where we haven't made enough progress yet, and yes, with the Council to work on better transport and road links. I've had 3 great national campaigns that I've been leading or involved with over the last Parliament. I think the highlight of my time over the last 5 years, when I was one of those who wrote to the Prime Minister in the summer before the Syrian attempt, telling him that we were against any military intervention in Syria and telling him that we would vote against if he dared to try it. And it was a great day when Labour joined us and agreed that a military intervention in Syria was not right. I think it would have been a disaster to try and topple Assad, given what ISIL is now doing and the very complicated barbaric politics of Syria. And it is difficult enough where we are today, and I think it would have been worse if we'd risked our soldiers' lives. I've been speaking for England, and I want in the next Parliament, if elected, to get justice for England in a new constitutional settlement. But above all, I want to fight austerity. I hate the austerity that was visited on this country in 2008-9 by the banking crash and by the bad decisions taken which precipitated the Great Recession. I urge the Chancellor to change our approach to commercial banks in the first part of this Parliament. It is now beginning to work. I want to see that recovery continue. I want more people in better paid jobs. I want prosperity for all, and I look forward to the pleasure of representing Wokingham if you will back me in the ballot.
Good evening. I'm Adrian Windish. I represent the Green Party. The Green Party are different to the other parties in many ways, so are in effect the only real alternative on many issues. We're for the common good, not just the 1%. For a start, we'll be looking at the long term. We think future generations should be a consideration for all policy decisions, not just thinking of the next election. It's too short a time span. We're the only ones against austerity, fracking, privatisation of schools and hospitals and leisure facilities. Wokingham Council recently privatised the leisure facilities. We're also against nuclear weapons. They don't protect us, but they do make us a target. Aldermaston AWE, it's only 20 miles away from here, within the constituency. We would renationalise the railways, make every school a good school, under local authority control. We would encourage small businesses, not giant corporations that take over high streets, and avoid paying their share of taxes. We would cut loopholes and pursue avoiders. A green vote is a positive way of rejecting the other party's policies, a vote for future generations. Vote green on May the 7th. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that initial sense of where you're coming from and introduction about who you are. We appreciate that. Thank you. I am now going to issue a ban on applause, okay, because I know there's partly that thing we want to say, don't we, that we want to say, yes, we've heard you and we recognise that. So if I say don't applaud anybody, you won't feel bad about doing it for one and not for the other, okay? We've applauded everybody for their introductory statement and that's it. The other thing I just want to encourage our friends here tonight is we want to hear positively from you. We don't want to hear negatively what you're not going to do and what other people are not doing. We want to hear positively what you are going to do. So that's, I want to encourage you to focus on that, please. Now, our first question is from Alan Winter. Where's Alan Winter? There you are. Please, when the microphone comes to you, would you like to stand up and ask the question? And then Phil is going to answer first, and they're going to take it in turns. Thank you.
In 2011, David Cameron described the UK housing market as broken. The housing crisis has only got worse since then, so what would the candidates do to solve our housing crisis?
Thank you. Phil.
Well, thank you. I could take a well-trodden politician's path and say thank you, Alan, for your question. But I know you might feel that that's a bit cynical, but what I can tell you is this. We have a very clear and very well-costed manifesto within UKIP, which gives us the opportunity to spend money where it's needed and also the opportunity to save it where it would be wasted. One area, no doubt, is on housing. We have to deal with both sides of the problem, i.e. demand and supply. You will be unsurprised to know that if we can control our borders and know how many people want to move here, then we will have an opportunity to plan. What company wouldn't want to put together a costed plan for the next however many years? But we want to think about Wokingham and its surrounds and other green areas, farming areas. I don't, and UKIP don't agree with using the greenbelt land to build houses on. We want to put together a brownfield register, which we can use, we believe, to create 1 million new homes. Not only that, but there are also well over 500,000 empty homes in this country which could be utilised. So we've got a number of ways that we can approach it. Now, of course, even locally, when you hear of big developments and you see the plans for them, and you listen to the discussions, you hear that 35% of the houses to be built in a particular development are to be for affordable homes or for social homes. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to actually ever be 35%. I don't know if you've noticed, but the latest proposal in Arborfield's only 20%, with a bit of cash, maybe. Well, I want to see those proposals stuck to. We need to build the houses, not just here. We're not a not-in-my-backyard type of people, but we want sensible development, sustainable for our future.
Thank you. Clive.
Thank you very much for your question, Alan. People need a home that they can live in. That's what we get a mortgage for. It is our home for many, many years. I've got 2 young daughters who are 20 and 22, and I don't think that they're going to be able to afford to live round here. I want them to live round here. I don't want them to move away. I want them to be here. But one of them is working in the NHS. She's unlikely to have the salary that is going to help her to buy a house by herself or with her partner. So the Liberal Democrats have introduced, or are introducing, if we are back in government in the next election, a process where you can rent a property that is built by the government, and everything that you pay in rent goes towards you owning that property. And that, I think, is something that is going to help people who work in the NHS and teachers and the police service and those sort of jobs. We haven't built enough homes in the UK for many, many years. The Liberal Democrat target for the next 5 years is 300,000 houses a year. It's a big target, but we have to start to do something. We have to build more social housing, and I am not an advocate of selling off social housing, because that has given us some of the problems that we have with housing these days, where there just isn't enough social housing. Everybody wants the right to own their own home, but selling off social housing and housing from housing associations is not the answer.
Thank you, Clive. Kaz.
Yes, I've got several views on this. I'd like to first make it clear that the way I'm standing is my actual policies will be decided on Thursday in another meeting, because the idea was that people would have a good understanding of what options there were and then say, right, you are going to commit to like that. So you could, while these chaps might have a good idea, they won't commit to it, they might have a good idea that I will actually commit to. There's various things that are missing here, like developer contributions I think have been historically very low. So one of the things that there is actually a stockpile of money, but what you find is a landowning trust will buy a plot of land and use it as a farm for a while. Then the developers will come along and they will come along and make a pre-purchase agreement with the farmer to buy it at a certain price. And what you find is actually the amount of money being created out of handing a planning permission to someone who's got a farm is obscene. It might be as much as £1 million an acre. You haven't built a thing yet, it's just a brick. It's not even a brick on the ground. So there's a whole planning structure that is benefiting from a stranglehold currently on the way where property is near work and how quickly you can build it. So this is all being manufactured in many ways. There are more empty homes than there are homeless people. So one of the problems we have is that we're constantly trying to drive work around London and into the Thames Valley while starving the rest of the country of any functional work, which devalues the homes in those areas and makes everybody flood to here. That problem, doesn't matter how many houses you build, will always happen unless you have a bit of better equality. And the price of the home is tied to another thing quite key here. We now have 30% privately rented accommodation. I'm a landlord myself, and I'm not speaking in my own best interest in a policy that I think is dispopular with most people, but something I'd like to see, which would be the right to buy your private home. So if I'm renting a property to a tenant, after a given time, maybe 5 to 10 years, they would have the right to force me to sell them their home. They've been living in it, and we would split the capital gain. So I still have a vested interest in running as a landlord, but when I'm no longer providing a functional service, I'm not going to just continue to leech from their disposable income so that my family can leech from their children.
Thank you. John.
Some measures have been taken, but a lot more needs to be done. We first of all launched Help to Buy. This is designed to take some of the waiting out of wanting by allowing people to buy a house when they don't have the full deposit that a bank requires under current rules. Chancellor has just announced a scheme which I think should work well in the years ahead, which is the Help to Buy ISA, which means that when people are saving for their first home, saving for that deposit, there will be a useful cash top-up from the state to accelerate their savings and to make it a bit easier for them. A new scheme we would like to launch, if in government after May, is to build 200,000 affordable homes that would be sold at a 20% discount to their normal market value. And that would be because we would reduce some of the requirements on the developers so that they would be able to do it within their normal profit margins, and it would make it that much more affordable for people. Clearly, the main answer to the housing crisis in London and the South East is to build more homes, and it is a very difficult balance to get right, because we don't want to build on every green field, we don't want to erode the green belts, we want to keep pleasant and good environments, but we must understand the imperative that there are many people who cannot get on that housing ladder or can't find an affordable home to rent, and we need more homes of all kinds. So it's going to require careful and skillful political handling to find the sites, to bring forward the sites, and to try and make the money and the finance work. What we need to be aware of is there are many well-intentioned interventions in the market now being suggested to try and keep rents down, but if you look at what's happened in some countries that have followed those, notably places like France, they may help temporarily existing tenants, although when the break clause occurs then the rent goes up, but they do suppress supply of new tenanted accommodation, and the last thing we need at the moment is something which stops supply.
Thank you. Thank you. And Adrian.
Thank you. The house prices are ridiculous. They go up, and this government seems to want to encourage that. After a few years of stagnation, here we go again, another bubble. There is a way of ending that. It's called land value taxation, where you split the value of the land from the value of the house. I don't have time to go into it now, and I'm not sure it's the perfect policy, but nonetheless I think it's worth looking into. I think sometimes you need a radical break from what's gone on before, because clearly what's gone on before isn't working. We also have an awful lot of empty homes, as other people have mentioned. Also, a number of rich people have second homes, or third or more. Why have empty homes when there are homeless people? Why have empty offices? Why not convert those into houses? I agree with some of what's been said. We don't want to build on the greenbelt. We don't want to build on marginal land that's prone to flooding. It makes flooding worse for everyone else. We would build 500,000 social homes for rent over the 5-year Parliament. We would control excessive rents, and we would try and achieve house price stability. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right. Okay. No, I've got to go over here. Yeah, you nearly caught me out there, you see. But fortunately, I am helped by my colleagues. So please do. We're all now on the edge of our seats waiting for what you've got to say.
Thank you very much. I don't enjoy agreeing with David Cameron, but in this instance he was absolutely right. There is a housing crisis, and there's a rental crisis, and there's a buying crisis. In terms of rental, we've got 11 million people living in rented accommodation, and their tenancies are essentially very, very insecure. It makes it very, very difficult for families to plan schools, to plan work, and to plan finances. Okay. We also have a finance of cost for people who want to buy houses. Simply put, in this area, it is too expensive for young people, even middle-aged people, to think of buying a house. Those of you who've been following the news today will be perhaps aware that Labour launched our sixth pledge, our sixth promise to people, which is homes to buy and action on rent. And we are committing to build 200,000 homes a year by the end of the next Parliament. We will aim to build a mixture of homes for rent, social housing, and homes to buy. We will start a national housing corporation. This national housing corporation will work with local authorities to allow and enable local authorities to put up more social housing. I myself am a product of 2 of Wokingham's council estates, so I really do appreciate and value the need for good quality social housing. In addition, we will introduce a stamp duty holiday for the first 3 years of the next Parliament for first-time buyers. So any first-time buyers out there, for the first 3 years of a Labour government, if the property is worth less than £300,000, you will not be paying stamp duty. We have a whole bunch of other stuff which is good for housing, but I can see my time is up. Please look at our website if you want to see any more.
Thank you. No, I've not left anyone else out, have I? No. Right. So we will now move on to the second question, which is from Peter Steer. Peter, where are you? Down the front here. Thank you.
Thank you. What would be the effect on the United Kingdom of Britain if Britain decided to withdraw from the EU?
Thank you. And you go first, Clive.
Thank you very much for your question, Peter. The biggest effect will be the loss of jobs. We will lose up to 3.5 million jobs. We won't lose them all in the first few weeks, but we will lose them over the few years from when we have come out of the EU, because so many multinational companies that are based here will decide to move over onto the mainland of Europe. So we will lose lots of jobs if we come out of the EU. Currently, 50% of our exports from the UK go to the European market. We will lose some of that. So that will make our businesses suffer here. If we're part of Europe, we can be involved in trade negotiations with other trading blocs in the world. So we can do trade agreements with America, we can do trade agreements with China and with Russia, and we can do it as a group of 28 countries. If we come out, we will have no influence on those trade agreements. And that, I think, would be a very, very bad thing for us. One of the big things that the European Union has done for us since 1945 is keep the peace in Europe. Most of you will remember that when you were at school you had history lessons about Nelson and Napoleon fighting, and then the First World War and the Second World War, and we were fighting other countries in Europe. We haven't been doing that since 1945. And I think that the European Union is a big part of why we've had peace in Europe, and it's a very important thing to consider if there is a referendum in a few years' time.
Thank you very much, Clive. Kaz, over to you.
Oh, yes. So, the first reference that Clive made there was about jobs and how we'd lose a lot. And, I don't think China's doing too badly with having jobs outside the UK or outside Europe. But one thing I definitely agree with is that we're not going to have another European war. I'm certainly not going to war with my wife's family who live in France, or vice versa, I should imagine. So I've got arguments for or against, but I would stay where I given the choice, because it will be Wokingham's choice, not just because of the police, for the peace, but I think the biggest threat actually that we have is the way that capital is managed. Capital represents a debt of over other people. That's all it actually is backed by. And the Europe is the one that's driving us into the right direction when it comes to banking, not us. We're the ones trying to make sure that trusts can remain with trustees who are never declared, owning assets that no one, you don't know who owns UK. When you see the Forbes rich list, it's only the ones where people are declaring their wealth. There's plenty of undeclared wealth, people avoiding tax, and all of that wealth is ultimately a debt over your children doing work in the future. There's nothing else backing it up. And it's Europe who's addressing those issues, not the UK. So I'd select to stay in the Euro as well, in the EU, not join the Euro, but stay in the EU as well, because they are dragging us in the right direction.
Thank you very much. John.
I was one of a small group of MPs who had meetings with the Prime Minister and his advisers to persuade him to make the historic Bloomberg speech. I think perhaps one of the most important prime ministerial speeches made in the last 30 years. And that speech says that because Europe is now rushing headlong into full political union, as the Euro members must, to try and rescue and improve the workings of their currency and their budgetary system, so Britain must define a new relationship with that emerging power. I think we all agree that no one believes we can join the Euro or wish to join the Euro, and I get no appetite from Wokingham or elsewhere for political union and the United States of Europe. So the Prime Minister said that we must be honest with our colleagues and friends in Europe, and we must define that new relationship. Now let me reassure you, Clive, none of us have any intention of undermining or damaging our trade or our investment flows. We want them as much as you do. And the good news is that no less a luminary than the German finance minister, when he had read and digested the Bloomberg speech, said that he hoped that Britain didn't leave the European Union, but were she to do so, Germany would be first in the queue wanting a free trade arrangement. And of course they would, because Germany sells us twice as much as we sell Germany. So there's no danger of risking trade. Nor, I'm pleased to reassure you, is there any danger of a war between France, Germany and the United Kingdom, whether we stay in, go out or succeed in my aim of negotiating a new relationship based on trade, investment, political cooperation, but falling short of political integration and common centralised government. But what I am worried about with the EU is how it is destabilising other countries around the European periphery. And I think the European Union has done considerable damage in Ukraine, and I wish the European Union would be fairer and stronger and not be such a disruptive influence.
Thank you. Adrian.
Thank you. Well, there's a wide spectrum of opinions on these tables, and I'm sure you'll hear more. There's a lot of good stuff coming from the EU and a lot of bad stuff. Let's keep the good and kick out the bad. The question, though, was what would happen. Yes, there are some international companies that have specifically come here to be within the EU, so yeah, they probably would leave. However, yeah, there may be more negotiations, there may be different treaties. There are other countries that are not in the EU but yet trade with the EU. It would be good to hear a proper debate just on this. This isn't long enough, and I'm certainly not expert enough on this issue. Whenever it's discussed, you just get the extreme opinions, I think. And I think it would be good to hear from the media, for example, never really tell you what is the consequence. So hopefully you'll be more informed tonight. I'm getting more informed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andy.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. The effect on the UK of us leaving the European Union, I've just come up very, very quickly with 5 quick ones. There was a story in The Guardian today, and it was reporting on a German economic study which estimated that the UK's gross domestic product would shrink by 14% should the UK leave the European Union. Such would be the disruptive impact on trade. There would still be trade and there would still be holidays and all the rest of it, but the disruption would happen. Okay? And the estimate is a 14% contraction of GDP, which in layman's terms is catastrophic. We would then have to pay the European Union for access. When you hear the stories of Norway trades with the European Union, Switzerland trades with the European Union, these other countries have relationships outside of Europe, they pay for them. Okay? They pay, they get the access, but they have no influence on what happens within the European Union. Thirdly, it might well precipitate the disintegration of the United Kingdom. At the moment, last year rather, Scotland voted to stay in the UK and in the UK that was part of Europe. If the UK leaves Europe, there's a very real chance, in my opinion, that the Scots will decide, you know what, that is a big enough change in our arrangement to leave. So we will end up with, if you like, an R-UK, which is in effect just England sitting in the North Sea. And it would weaken the EU. Okay? People have been talking about the peace in Europe. Well, you know, Putin has got his green men appearing all over Eastern Europe. Okay? Europe has never been more dangerous. Okay? What we do not need to do is to weaken one of the 2 bodies which has kept peace, the other, of course, being NATO. And we also have to remember the role that the EU played in spreading democracy through the emerging countries of Spain, Greece and Portugal. The EU is a good tool for, if you like, spreading a common set of standards. But in Europe, we would lose that. And finally, we will be ignored in the world. China's not going to...
Thank you, Andy. I'm going to cut you off there. Thank you. Phil, your turn.
I'm going to stand for the benefit of my legs. Well, you're all going to be surprised by what I've got to say, I'm sure. The idea that we would leave the EU and become some sort of a lame, hanging-on partner, like a suckerfish on the side of a shark, is quite ridiculous. We're a very strong and a wealthy country. We've got a strong tradition with international trade, with entrepreneurialism and industry. We've got a lot to offer around the world. We've got a commonwealth of nations who see us as one of their close friends. And in my experience of living and working in a commonwealth country, it's their first thought that they might talk to the British and then they talk to others. Jobs and trade is not going to disappear. Absolutely not. We want to make this country more wealthy, more successful. We want to be able to help more those people who need it in our own country by developing our own economy and having control over it. Now, of course, we can do that best if we have strong laws and we have strong control over the way that our industries and our Jobs are put together through education, and we can follow that all the way through. And what do we have? We have the opportunity to fill those skill gaps we currently have from within our own population. So the EU, we want to be friends with Europe. We want to trade with Europe. Goodness knows they need us just as much as we need them, as has already been said. But I think that we need the 8 billion or more that we spend on being a member of this club, and we need to help it to make our country stronger.
Thank you. Right, look, they're coming in. Now, question 3 is from Vivian Johnson. There we go, thank you. Over here, in the red. Put your hand up again so we can see where you are, thank you.
In your opinion, what is the most important issue for the people of Wokingham at the present time?
So you're going to start.
I'm standing up, so I'm going to try that too. See how it goes.
You've only got 2 minutes though.
Been a while, my legs don't work. I'm glad you asked that question, because that's one of my fundamental problems I have, is that Localism Act 2011 made it so that you've got 54 borough councillors who decide what happens locally. The MP's influence on that will be minor. For example, when we talk about let's say, for example, Grays Farm. So the council bought Grays Farm, but if a developer had bought it. Now, as we know, Grays Farm ended up being sold for around about £20,000 an acre. But if you try and buy an eighth of an acre of land with the right to build a house on it, you'll be spending £150,000 an acre. There's a big deficit there. Now, the council currently get around about £23,000 from each dwelling, and they also have, depending on the number of houses built, a certain amount of affordable housing, which they purchase at about 60% of the cost. But basically, there's an awful lot of money to be made, most of the money to be made, in changing the value of that land. Now, the reason that is the system is what an MP can influence. I would rather it be a system whereby someone pays tax on the land value change, rather than the developer coming and doing some deal and it just kind of gets created out of nothing, and the council gets such a small part of it. That money should mostly come to the community who've given permission for that land to be developed. But, so for me, the most pressing issue you have, actually, is the way elections are run. Every single one of you could be a borough councillor, and most of you probably never even considered to stand. You weren't even told that you had a chance to stand. You weren't given there's no sign-up in Wokingham saying, here, come and be a borough councillor, you'll be getting paid £8,000 a year, and it would be acceptable if you did half a day a week. That information wasn't made available to you. And so what you've got is now a clique who are keeping all of that information to themselves, controlling all of these contracts, and the public have been left out.
Thank you, Kath. John.
Well, I do have a bit of an unfair advantage here, because I've been receiving a couple of hundred emails and website contributions a day over 5 years when representing you, and had lots of conversations with people. So I think I can answer exactly what is the most pressing issue for Wokingham constituency people overall. And I think it can be summed up in the rather technical portmanteau word planning. It's all those things. It's where should new houses be sited? Do we have sufficient roads? How are we going to get to the station? Is the train service adequate for all the people now living here? Are we able to protect our green spaces? Is the council doing a good enough job making sure that the much valued green spaces are properly protected and looked after, whilst finding proper provision for the affordable homes we were talking about earlier, and trying to do something to improve the journey to school and work? Perhaps the most frustrating thing for many people in the Wokingham area is that journey to work and school. Most people are in two-worker households, leading very busy lives. The morning peak and the afternoon and evening peak is extremely difficult, and so they're desperate for the council to find their way through. And I hope the schemes the council are now producing, with a bit of help with permissions and money sometimes from the government, are going to make a difference. We certainly had a spectacular example of how Wokingham can be messed up in a good cause, we hope. On the eve of this election, it's making it much more difficult for all of us to get to the places we need to get to, because we see so many roadworks going on. But that is the big issue. How can we create a successful and flourishing community, keep that all is best and green and beautiful, but improve our lives so that we can lead our busy lives in a civilised way?
Thank you very much, John. Adrian.
Thank you. Wokingham constantly comes up as one of the top places to live in the country. But yet, like every other constituency in the country, we have poverty, we have people who are really struggling, and they've struggled more under this coalition. Things have got much worse for them. And I think it's them that we need to be thinking about. Let's make things better for them. All the issues mentioned are important. Commuting, traffic. The answer for me, let's improve public transport, let's get people out of cars, but that doesn't seem popular with my friends over that way. They'd rather spend money on roadworks, let's improve roads. Well, you just attract more traffic to the road, that never works. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andy.
As Adrian has said, Wokingham comes top of all sorts, or near the top of all sorts of lists as to what a wonderful place it is. And it's my hometown. I'm always going to think it's wonderful wherever it appears on those lists. Overdevelopment is a common complaint. The number of houses, the location of the houses, but at the same time, we have the complaint that the houses are too expensive for local people to buy, and the houses are too expensive to rent. School places. We had the almost fiasco of the new school in the south of Wokingham, where the council, even though they know they're going to run out of secondary school places, were unable to plan for new places. And it was only because of the actions of some citizens in the town who put pressure on the council that the council went ahead and actually sorted out that problem. Traffic congestion. Terrible, we all know that. Redevelopment of the town centre. There's a sense that the council isn't listening. What are they doing with the town centre? That's such a common complaint when I talk to people. But I'm going to talk about, because I'm the Labour Party, I'm going to talk about hidden poverty in Wokingham. We've got families that can't afford to provide things for their young children. We've got a food bank which seems to get busier and busier. We've got homeless men queuing up at the Salvation Army Hall to get showers. And we've got over 2,000 people on the families on the council house waiting list with little real prospect of being housed. Okay, those are the problems which concern me in Wokingham.
Thank you, Andy. Phil.
For those that don't know me, my rest is standing, so I'm pleased to do it every time. It's very difficult to actually put one word out to you about what is the biggest issue that's facing Wokingham. I wish that I could. But I think that a lot of them are very linked together. Planning is something that's been mentioned. And yes, I sometimes wonder if that word exists in Wokingham when I look at the chaos that I have to face just to get to work in the morning. And it's turning into an ever-expanding amount of bricks and concrete, lessening green, with a great big grey traffic pollution blob over the top of it. Well, that's the way that I feel at the moment. We need to plan better. We need to be more strategic in the way that we develop. We need to be clever with our money, and we need to persuade developers to do the right thing. Let's be honest, we can build as many houses as we want to in Wokingham, or should I say persuade developers to. They're not going to suddenly decide to put them all then up to £100,000 cheaper. One of the reasons developers want to build here is because they've got great profit and they'll be sold straight away. So I think that it's down to the whole area of the way that our council plans and the effect that you can have. Someone mentioned the Localism Act, and I think it's actually really important that we give local people a voice, that you actually feel like you have a say in what happens in your community, the chance to say, no, stop. For a minute, let us have a break, for goodness sake. I know my parents, I wouldn't want to wish them away, but they could spend the last years they've got sitting in traffic. So let's just, they could. So let's just be realistic. Let's plan how to get around, and then we can perhaps put the houses in the right places. Finally, when it comes to locism, the settlement. We need to get the right funding from central government out to
Thank
Wokingham.
you, Phil. And Clive.
Thank you very much for your question, Vivian. Wokingham is a great place to live. I've enjoyed living here for the last 40 years. You've asked what is the most important issue. There are several that are really important. One of them is to continue to stabilise the economy. We need to get the deficit under control. we need to protect NHS budgets, and we need to protect education budgets. And very, very locally, we need to make sure that we don't just become a massive car park in half of Berkshire. And we are really in danger of doing that because we're not thinking enough about the infrastructure that has to go in before all of these houses go in. We're not thinking about the doctor's surgeries that we need, we're not thinking about all the schools that we need, and we're not thinking about the roads or the cycleways or even trains. We're not thinking about the bus routes that we need to have, and we're not thinking about where the employment is going to go. It's all going to be squeezed into Reading and Winner's Triangle, which means that people are going to get in their cars and drive through the centre of Wokingham and through Winner's and through Lower Earley, where I live, to get to work. And they have to make it easier for them to do that. The town centre regeneration, we don't need to be spending £139 million on the town centre regeneration. We don't need extra shops at the bottom of Elmsfield. When Elmsfield is built on, the green space that is there will be gone, and you won't be able to bring it back. The car park that is right outside here is going to disappear. So where do 23,000 people who go to the doctor's surgery down the road park when they come into Wokingham to go to the doctors? Those are some of the important issues that you need to be thinking about when you vote in this in this general election.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, we've had 3 questions. I'm going to suggest that we do 2 things now. The first is I'm going to suggest that in a minute you stand up and turn around and sit down again, because you've been sitting and listening very well and been sitting very quietly as well, so that's been fantastic. And also I'm looking vaguely around the place. Is it possible to have some more water here on this side? That would be great. And maybe some more on this side as well. So do stand up. You've got 2 minutes. Look, the clock's on and I'll tell you when you have to stop. You can exercise the same discipline. And now please, we've got a big stack of questions and we want to try and get through as many as possible now. So question 4 is Derek Hutchinson. Where are you, Derek? Derek's behind you over there. Thank you. Put your hand up again, Derek. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Do you believe that the government is spending more than its income? And, if so, how would you raise revenue and cut expenditure? Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, you're first. Sorry, shall I just say it again, just to be absolutely clear? Do you believe that the government is spending more than its income? And if so, how would you raise revenue and cut expenditure?
Well, let me just give you 2 figures which sum up the last Parliament, and they also happen to be the identical figures for the Conservative plan for the next Parliament. If you take total spending per person, every man, woman and child, divide total spending by the number of people, the coalition government increased spending by £1,000 per person in the final year of the coalition compared with the last Labour year, and it increased revenue from every person in the country by £2,000 a head if you average it out. So it actually brought down the amount you have to borrow, but it still left us borrowing a large amount. And so what the Conservatives are proposing is to get rid of the extra borrowing by the end of the next Parliament, and that would require the same thing. Put up public spending by £1,000 a head again, per annum, but put up tax revenue by £2,000 a head. And the good news is that the official forecast, the OBR forecast, for the next 5 years says that we can get that extra £2,000 a person in tax revenue at current tax rates if the economy grows at its current rate of growth, which most forecasters seem to think it will. So that is the plan. All the main parties believe that we need to get our deficit down more, that there are limits to how much a country can borrow. The country over the coalition period borrowed another £500 billion, that is as much as Labour borrowed in their period, so we certainly didn't stint the borrowing, and we were able to increase welfare benefits, we were able to increase overseas aid, we were able to increase health. The spending figures allow us to provide the extra £8 billion of health spending for NHS England over the next 5 years, to increase the welfare benefits and pensions in the way that we usually do with the triple lock now, and also to honour our other commitments.
Thank you. Yes, government has been, and I think almost always does spend more than income, especially in the lower rates of growth that we've been getting and the increased unemployment and the low-paid jobs. There's less income coming from all of those people. But that doesn't worry the Greens so much. What worries us is the increasing inequality, because the rich are getting richer, the poor have been getting poorer. Many of them are really struggling. We would, as the coalition have cut so much, they've cut the number of people getting tax. They've cut the HMRC. Well, of course they're going to struggle to get tax. Let's give some people jobs collecting tax. What about the big corporations that don't seem to pay any tax? It's not fair. If you're a small business, how can you compete against the big businesses? But yes, what else was I going to say? The AAA rating that we used to have, slightly ironically under Labour, the coalition lost that. So they say we're in a better position, but the debt has gone up. It's slightly confusing between the deficit and the debt. The deficit is every year how much you're getting and how much you're spending, whereas the overall debt, that's how big a pile we owe overall, and that has grown, not quite doubled over the period of this government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andy.
Thank you for the question, Derek. Do I believe that the government is spending more than it's raising by income? Yes, I do. How do you raise income and cut expenditure? I suppose the thing I would like to look at most is the tax gap. The tax gap is the difference between what the inland revenue actually collects and what the inland revenue could collect. Now, the tax gap is variously estimated, depending on whose numbers you use, somewhere between, 20 million and sort of 20 billion rather, and 100 billion pounds per year. Okay, so obviously closing that tax gap will be a major part of my contribution, hopefully, if I am elected as your MP in Wokingham. The other way to raise revenue or to raise income is to make sure people have got better paying jobs. Okay, the better paying your job, the more tax you will pay. And one of the problems we've had with the recovery that the current or the previous administration has given us is that many of the new jobs that have been created are not well paid and people are not paying tax, and it's one of the major causes for Osborne missing his revenue targets. We would stay in Europe. If we lose Europe, the economic dislocation will be great, and again we will lose revenue there. And how do we cut expenditure? That's the other side of the equation. You cut expenditure gently. That's how you cut expenditure. You don't slash and burn, as this last administration has done, because the consequences for the vulnerable and for the economy are catastrophic. And we've seen that where, as I said earlier, we had growth at the end of the last government, and that growth went because of the aggressive cutting of the last government. And finally, one of my favourites, we go after the non-doms. It might not raise that much, but there is a principle here. If you live here, you pay tax here.
Thank you very much, Andy. Phil.
Well, there's a correlation between what happens locally and what happens nationally. Very tenuous, you might think. But one of the things that we seem to want to do at the moment is to spend money on vanity projects. So in other words, someone in early at a door said to me just the other day, what on earth do I care about what's happening in Wokingham Town Centre, and why do I want my kids to still have to be paying the bill for that loan? So please tell me. And I couldn't, because it's not right. Now, when you think about that, HS2, where's the benefit? Even in the House of Lords, with their own inquiry, they found that there isn't one that can be seen. So we would take away that expenditure that is promised on there, and we would use it wisely. We would, as I've already said, look to leave the EU and to reduce the net amount that we contribute to the EU and use that money at home. And also, foreign aid. I talked earlier, we absolutely need to use foreign aid wisely. We need to be able to give to the weakest and poorest nations in time of need, and we need to hold our own when it comes to looking after the people in those countries where they need resources. But we also should start to think about ourselves at home. Finally, the Barnett formula, I think, is something which you may or may not understand, but there is a settlement from national government, and £1,400 roughly per capita more goes to Scotland than goes here. I already mentioned the local settlement, which is a major problem. So we can do all of that. We can find the money to actually follow the policies that we have put forward, but we won't be hitting the most vulnerable, who don't deserve to shoulder the profligacy of those people who've spent it all before,
Thank you,
and
Phil.
the bankers that did so.
Thank you, Phil. Clive, over to you.
Thank you very much, Derek. The government has always spent more than it takes in. I think in my lifetime, I'm 56, there's only been 2 Chancellors of the Exchequer that's actually balanced the books. And I think that was Nigel Lawson in 1987, and I think Gordon Brown did it once as well. So we have to borrow money to keep the economy going. The borrowed money has got to be used to develop infrastructure in the countries, to build schools, to build social housing, to build hospitals. And it doesn't need to be used for anything else than that. We do have to raise taxes. One of the big things that the Liberal Democrats have done in this last government is to give 25 or 26 million people a tax cut by increasing tax thresholds. And we will continue to do that if we're in government in the next Parliament. But I think that those who are better off should pay a fairer share of their income and their wealth in tax. And I would hope that the Liberal Democrats will do that if they are back in government, as I hope that they're going to be after May the 7th. You can't afford to let the Conservatives come back by themselves, because if you do, they will balance the books on the backs of the working poor. They won't be doing it for the majority in society. They will be doing it for the few in society. They will be giving tax cuts to just a few people, and surprisingly, an awful lot of those bankroll the Conservative Party.
Thank you. Kaz, you have the last word on this question.
Oh, great. So I'm glad this is a question, because if you understand what currency actually is, it is just a division of units of time that you are willing to invest in the future. That's all it's backed by. And also the tangible assets. But again, they're backed by the ability to you to want them or you to process them. So the whole idea that we have a debt is actually something that is manufactured to try and make a stable situation. If we had unlimited money, we'd become lazy and we'd do nothing. So you try and make a balance. We're a sovereign state. We could literally just create money and just wipe out all our debts. That would push up inflation, but you would then have a lower value of your currency when you try to import from abroad. But we could just do that. We could wipe out our debts just like that, just by printing it out of nothing. So we choose to do it in different ways, but we choose to do it always through the banks. We issue a bond. We then have the banks buy that bond off us at an interest rate, and then the banks then lend it. At the moment, what's the capital reserves? About 30 times that amount of money floods the economy. We print, was it 10 at the moment? About 10% at the moment. So you've got, you print £300 billion, and you end up with £3 trillion extra in the economy floating around. So that intrinsically must be debt. The way we create money can do nothing but increase debt. It's inevitable. We create debt, and it's all part of the illusion, but it's all part of a system which is actually required. We try to keep people functioning. So this level of, we're desperate, that we have going on, it makes no sense that we should have computers and cars and technology, that we can all work more productively, but the productivity isn't resulting in us being better off, because it's all being siphoned off to people like David Cameron and other people. And John Redwood started a business in 2007 of wealth management, and then in 2008 you moved their money into cash so that they didn't get hit by the sting. There's no magic money tree. Our money, went to the wealthy. But the people near us have helped them do it.
Thank you. Right, we are going to move on to the next question, which is a question by Emma Cantrell. Where's Emma? There we go, thank you.
Thanks. Hi. There are 3,500 children living in poverty in Wokingham. If elected, how do you plan to use your influence in Westminster to reduce this number so that all children in Wokingham have the same start in life?
Thank you, Emma. Adrian, to start.
Thank you. Very good question. A growing number of children in poverty. What do you do about it? Well, you could increase the benefits for the worst off, the ones that have been hit by the coalition government. The disabled as well, they've been hit very hard. And tax the rich. We've got no problem with increasing the taxes on the very wealthiest. The others will argue about 45 or 50%. We'd have 60%. Why not? They can afford to lose a little bit, whereas the very poorest, they can't afford to lose any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. Andy.
Thank you for that question, Emma. One of the main causes, I believe, of child poverty is sudden and unexpected rent increases, which the parents may suffer. Labour will introduce a system of secure rents, which allows families to plan their finances. So rather than rents being raised indiscriminately by landlords, rents will be capped to raise at the rate of inflation. In addition, we will give young families 25 hours of free childcare per week. We will also introduce wraparound childcare for children in primary schools, so that from 8 until 6 in the evening there will be childcare within the for the children. We will increase the minimum wage up to £8, again by work, trying to take people out of poverty. We will also introduce policies which encourage companies and councils to pay the living wage where possible, because I think we can all agree the best way to get people out of poverty is by higher salaries. If I am elected as Wokingham's MP, then obviously I would love to work with Emma, because I think you're actually the founder of First Days, the charity which does so much good work in Wokingham. I would love to work with you as your MP, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
Yes. It's interesting how we can have a conference back sometime last year and all of a sudden, election comes nearer, up pops a policy that we've presented, up pops another policy that we presented, promise here, promise there, all stuff that UKIP have actually previously suggested we could do. One of the things that we want to look at is wraparound childcare. We want to help people to be in work. We want to make it pay to be in work. So we want to take, for example, those people on the minimum wage completely out of tax. And that's with the rise in the minimum wage. But don't forget, it's not the government that pays the minimum wage. It's the companies that employ people, except for obviously those in public services. So we have to be careful with our money, but we have to spend it wisely. What also I think we need to do is to make sure that we offer every opportunity for work. It's not a big unemployment area here, but I think some of that is probably hidden, or it's covered up by some 0 hours work or some short hours contracts. And what we want to do is to make sure there's an opportunity for local people to be employed first and given the first chance on jobs in their local area, so they don't have to move around the country to find work. They get an opportunity here. So with UKIP, it's not about the things that maybe you think are in the headlines only. It's about a full, rounded set of policies which can actually help to develop a healthier, stronger, more wealthy community. So with those young people that are currently in poverty and their families are in poverty, help them find work, help work to pay for them, and make them an opportunity to live locally in affordable houses.
Thank you very much, Phil. Clive?
Thank you very much, Emma. The best way to get people out of poverty is through education. And if you can give a child a really good start in education, you can help them to get a good job, you can help them to have a much better life. A lot of children that are living in poverty, you said it's 3,500 in Wokingham. Some of their parents may never have worked before. We have to help those parents work. We have to get the children out of this cycle of deprivation. And you do that, the best way is by education. You have to help them get a job. The Coalition in the last 5 years have created 1.9 million jobs. That's a lot more than were created in the few years before the Coalition came to power. But it isn't enough. We've got to give people decent housing. We've got to build more social housing. That's why we want to build 300,000 houses. And we've got to make them affordable. We've got to make the rents affordable. So education is really what we have to be investing in to get people out of living in poverty. Free childcare will help because parents can then go to work. And the Liberal Democrats in the coalition government have led the clamour that is now being covered by other political parties to give people free childcare. We haven't spent enough on it. I think we've only given up to £1,000. We're saying we will do more in the next government. But for somebody on a very low income, that is a real help.
Thank you, Clive. Kaz.
Yeah, I mean, poverty is obviously an inevitable part of inequality. So as you have more people with all the assets able to buy the assets at the bottom, the people at the bottom will have to pay rent to the people at the top, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. There's no way around that. We can move furniture left or right and say we're going to do a little bit more childcare here, but we've got some fundamental problems there. I mean, by my calculations, if you understand currency, every child born is born with £24,000 worth of debt already on their head to support the currency owned by somebody else. And then if you take that, their cost of living is £15,000 a year, then it will take them 3 years of slave labour to pay off the debt they've been born with. That's actually counter to the rights that we should have as human beings. So, I mean, there's so many solutions, and I'd love to discuss lots of them with Wokingham about how we would change how we print, to take from the rich in a fair way, so they don't just avoid inheritance tax through offshore trust funds, and then they actually pay their fair share, so it's not actually a debt. One way would be, for example, you debase the currency as a child is born by £24,000. So they're born with a stack of money already there for them. That means that they weren't born in debt. They were born neutral. There's also, I mean, I like one of the Green policies, which is the one where you have a citizen salary, which should arguably be a living wage. But the problem with that is you're not required to do any work for it, and I don't think that would work. So I would like to see a right to work and a need to work, so that you would have access to your needs provided. So not everybody is actually a grown-up. They're a grown-up, but they're a child in a grown-up body. And some people can't manage things that well. And it's wrong just to throw money at them and say, do what you want. But if you provide someone with a purpose and a skill set and a job, and you give them that direction, don't just leave them out to the free market. There's plenty of things for everybody to do. And if they can do 20 hours worth of work and get a home of modest living accommodation, then that would be a better way of doing it, I think, rather than just throw them out to the walls and say, get a job.
Thank you, Kaz. John.
Conservatives wish to take everybody on the minimum wage out of income tax altogether and increase the thresholds to do so. And we wish to offer everyone with 3 or 4-year-old children 30 hours of free childcare a week, so they have more chance to go to work, because earnings from work are usually one of the best ways of getting out of poverty. And I'm pleased to report that, as measured by international standards, inequality in the United Kingdom is a bit lower today than it was in 2010. And you'll also be pleased to know that as a result of the tax policies being followed, the top 1% of all income earners now pay 28% of all the income tax paid, which is considerably more than they paid as a proportion under the previous government. I'd like to thank all those of you who have been involved with the food bank. You've been generous with your time and gifts. And it is sad that there are still people in a relatively rich town like Wokingham that need that service. And when I visited or talked to some of you involved, I've always said that when I was then the MP, if you find in the conversation that someone wasn't getting the benefits to which they're entitled, or if you found that the reason why they couldn't afford the meal that week was the benefits hadn't come through, I would certainly have been very willing to take it up and try and remove the bureaucratic obstacle, and I'm sure that's true of all the candidates on the platform, that where they elected they'd want to work with you and try and remove the blockage. If the individual doesn't have enough income because they haven't got a job but they could work, there are a large number of programmes and ways of assisting, training and support for people to get into work to get that first job. And again, it's something which, if you do pick it up through the food bank, please pass it on to the council or pass it on to central government department or your newly elected MP, because it's something that we do want to help with. None of us like poverty. It is a scourge. We want people to have greater opportunities and better lives. And it's even more stark in a rich place like Wokingham.
Thank you, John. Right. We now have our sixth question, and I think this will be the last one, so given our timing. So our sixth question is from Mark Passenger. Thank you, Mark.
What are the key features of the health service you would like to see in this country? How much state support would such a health service require, and are you prepared to provide that level of state support?
Okay, so it's a question about the key features of the health service that you'd like to see. How much state support would that require, and are you prepared to provide that level of support? Okay, Andy.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. The key feature of the health service that I would like to see is one from which profit is not extracted. That people often distinguish between a health service which is free at point of demand and where private companies can make profit. I would like to see a health service which private companies do not have an involvement with and from which profit is not extracted. Any surplus funds within the health service must stay within the health service. That's why I pay my tax. That's why you pay your tax, because you want every single penny to be spent on the health service. Recently, I think the boss of NHS England said that the health service would need £12 billion per year in additional funding in order to... Sorry? Eight, my mistake, thank you very much. It's nice to see the guys talking together. So it's almost like they work together, isn't it? Anyway, it's needed an extra £8 billion of funding. Other parties have committed that. The Labour Party will only commit to what we can afford. Okay, we have committed to an extra £2.5 billion, I think, which is part of our Time to Care fund. With that money, we will provide an extra 20,000 nurses and an extra 5,000 GPs. We will not go around making promises on the back of some magic money tree, which I think some of the other parties might be relying on. If that money tree is found in the Treasury, and if we get the growth, then obviously we will have the spare funds, but we will not commit to funding which just isn't there.
Thank you very much, Andy. Phil.
Okay, 15 years in the NHS working, firstly in GPs, with GPs in out-of-hours services and at Frimley Park Hospital, and now for the last 6 years in mental health. I can quite clearly say, when it comes to the NHS and the way that it operates, Mr. Redwood, guilty. Mr. Jones, guilty. Mr. Croy, guilty. They've sold the NHS down the river time and time again. I'll start with PFI, where you see billions of cash disappearing off which should be used to treat people. What on earth are we doing negotiating contracts for a building that I did work in for a while, that's a 30-year committed lease, and after 5 years, the money that the NHS had paid to rent it had covered the cost of it completely. The next 25 years was in the pockets of the wealthy. That's where it was. So that was the first thing. And then when it comes to privatisation, yes, okay, it was in order to make sure that we didn't have long waiting lists. But Labour threw cash at the NHS. Absolutely threw it under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Yeah, they reduced the waiting lists, but did they invest for the future? No. That's why we're at the moment still short of nurses. We're actually training this year 21,000. We've got 50,000 who applied for jobs that we haven't got the spaces to train. No, the idea of that was Great. We can go to the Philippines. We can go to West Africa, which I care for dearly. We can let them train our staff. How fair is that? We should be doing it through our education system, giving people an opportunity to have a career and to look forward to a career. So that's the Labour Party. The Conservative Party, let me tell you, for every £1 million that they spend, every private company that is doing a contract is going to be taking at least 100,000, if not 150,000, and putting it in their back pocket.
Thank
So
you,
actually,
Phil.
it's only 850,000 spent on care.
Thank you very much. And Clive.
Thank you very much for your question. I've stated in all of my leaflets, all 660,000 that we've delivered since the 1st of January last year, that I won't vote for any cuts in the NHS if I'm elected as a Member of Parliament. The Liberal Democrats have committed to spend £8 billion by the end of 2020, which is exactly what the Chief Executive of NHS England has asked for. Through personal experience, I want more to be done to improve the diagnosis and the treatment of cancer. The NHS has got to be free at the point of delivery for everybody who wants to use it. And I really resent you saying that I'm guilty of agreeing to the privatisation of the NHS.
You voted the Health and Safety.
Please, thank you.
One of my very close relatives, she was 84, has had to use the health service for the last 15 years. It's my mother-in-law. And she was a school cook. She would never have been able to afford to pay for the treatment that she has had for her bowel problems and her leukemia problems. So we have to make sure that the NHS is free at the point of delivery for everybody. And sadly, the NHS could not keep my mother-in-law going. They tried really hard the last few weeks, and sadly, her life came to an end this morning. So don't accuse me of wanting to privatise the NHS.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that with us. Kaz.
Yes, so we've got that little bit of Clive and Phil conflict there, but I just like to remind you that this is a party politics scenario, because Clive is now being blamed for the actions of the party he represents, but he's just one voice. Is he going to then say what he does, do as you ask him, we agree in this debate when he gets into Parliament, if he does, or is he going to do what he is told as part of the party, otherwise he would never get a position? And that's the problem you have here. You have no idea whatever we say, whether or not we're going to, as candidates, fulfil our obligations to you, or whether or not as members of parties we're going to fulfil our obligations to those parties. Regarding the actual NHS, and this is one where we've got obviously a historical scenario here, we can go back 5 years, look at the promises, and look at that they did not happen. We can go back even further and look at the PFI contracts and think somebody should be in prison. These PFI contracts were a fraud. And so, yes, we are, £8 billion short of what someone wants. And I think if as a society there's various things that we want to achieve, really. You've got your necessities, which is food, shelter and water. And I would add healthcare to that list of necessities. Everything else is play. Everything else is for fun. Those are your core elements. And if we had, 50% less bankers earning maybe for 1/4 of what they were, and they're all actually doctors, because I gather they're supposed to be quite clever people, then we would have more people working in the NHS doing something productive. We have a giant unproductive economy. If you're making something of low value into something of value, or you're bringing joy or bringing happiness and health to someone, you're doing something of value. And we've got too many people wasting their time doing nothing of value. They don't even enjoy doing it. I'm good.
Thank you. John.
The Chief Executive of NHS England has said we will need to spend £8 billion a year more by the end of the next Parliament. The Conservatives have said they will spend it. The Liberal Democrats have said they will spend it. And I'd like to help Andy. I think in practice, were there a Labour government, they would spend it as well. And I'd also like to reassure him that if he looks at the forecast OBR budget figures, he will see that their forecast for the next 5 years does show that £1,000 a head, over 60 billion increase in total spending by the 5th year. So 8 billion for health is a perfectly reasonable proportion of that increase in spending which we are planning, and can be financed by that £2,000 a head extra tax revenue, which the forecasts also include. So what do Conservatives want to do with extra money for health? Our priority is to train and recruit more GPs, because we do think you need a 7-day-a-week GP service now, and we think you need extended hours of opening for people who are ill but not sufficiently ill to want to not go to work, so that they can get in touch with the doctor out of work hours and go and see the doctor out of work hours. And that would, in some ways, represent a saving, because it would take a lot of pressure off the very expensive hospital service. Because at the moment, a large number of people don't bother with the GP. They find it too difficult to get through, or they don't want to trouble the GP. They go straight to A&E. They're either not ill at all, or they have something which GP could quite easily treat, or they are genuinely, seriously in trouble and they need the hospital service. And that is why we're getting the log jams and the waits in A&E, which is very expensive. So our starting point is recruitment and strengthening of the GP service, making it more patient-friendly, making it work alongside people who are not ill enough or don't think they're ill enough to warrant taking a day off work to trying to get through to the GP and then going to see the GP, and relieve some of the pressure on the hospital system. And of course we will need to invest a lot more in the high-tech medicine in our best hospitals as well.
Thank you, John. Adrian.
Thank you. Yes, we would fund the 8 billion required for the NHS. We would end the privatisation of the NHS. We would provide funding for free social care for the elderly, which would create 400,000 good jobs. I think we'd do free dental as well, which seems to have got lost a bit. After the Second World War, the amazing Labour government created the NHS. We had massive debt at the time, but yet we managed, didn't we? So yes, we've got a big debt now. That's not a problem. We can do it again. Why not? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's now 9:15, so we're going to finish there with the questions. Each of the candidates now just got an opportunity to make a closing statement, and then we'll close the kind of formal part of the evening, but I'm sure that there'll be opportunities for more discussion both between yourselves and with our friends here after we've finished formally. So, closing statements. Let's start with Phil. I think you're next. So, do you want to do that? Yes? 2 minutes. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for listening so carefully. I hope that some of us have helped to put some ideas in your mind as to what we represent when it comes to voting for us in the general election that comes up. You know that you're going to be offered cherries and sweets of extra money for this and extra money for that, uncosted, out of maybe some economic boom that we're going to have. But UKIP offer a fully costed manifesto where we can show where the money's coming and how we'll spend it. Yes, we can promise 20,000 nurses and 8,000 GPs, but it takes 10 years to train a GP. It takes 5 years to train a nurse. So we have to have a proper immigration system which gives us the opportunity to choose people to come that we need, so we can bring people in to support the NHS when it needs it. And in other cases, we can bring in other people. So we need to think about everything in the round. So think about what it is that you want locally for you. Think about the people in front of you who are prepared to work for you, which I hope all of us are, and put all of our effort for Wokingham forward in Parliament. And think about where you're going to put your cross. You might remember on the start of my opening sentence, my opening statement, I said, remember the word cross. Well, let me tell you, cross, because you can have a voice. And UKIP want to give you the opportunity to veto the things that you don't want locally, to have a say in what happens, and to bring something different to what you've had to struggle with in the last 5 years, and not have to rely on unfunded promises. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. Clive.
Thank you very much for all of your questions. Peter, I hope that you agree with me that we should be staying in the EU. And Emma, there was an excellent question. Every politician must be aiming to get children out of poverty. It's a disgrace that it goes on and on and on. And Mark, I'm very, very clear about the support that I will give to the NHS. So since January 2014, when I became the Liberal Democrat parliamentary candidate, we've delivered over 660,000 leaflets, focus leaflets, to the residents of Wokingham. No other party has tried to engage you in that way. We've had a really positive response to all of our focuses. It's been tremendous. The Liberal Democrats have a strong record of delivery in the coalition. We've delivered tangible benefits to the people of Wokingham. If you elect me as your MP for Wokingham, I will fight for a fairer society. I will fight for a stronger economy. I will fight for Wokingham, and I will fight for key services for the vulnerable in our society. I won't vote for any cuts in the education budgets. I won't vote for any cuts in the NHS budgets. And a very high priority for me, because of my personal experience, will be the better diagnosis and treatment of cancer. I will be a full-time Member of Parliament. I won't be taking any extra highly paid jobs to supplement my MP's salary, like some do. Thank you for coming, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. No, we're not having any applause, thank you. Kaz.
If you vote for me, what will I do? If I vote for me, I will make the poor richer and I will give everybody jobs and you will all have a new cat. Each and every one of you, I guarantee you a new cat. But I can't guarantee that because I don't know, and they do make a lot of cats. Cats seem to multiply, but I don't know in the future how many cats there are going to be, so I might not be able to. So I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to do anything that is impossible. And that's the problem we have. You're all sitting here today and we've all given you some hope and some ideas. But actually, those are still just ideas that historically we know. We can go back every election further back and back and back, and we know that these end up not being carried out. And that our Prime Minister is the heir to an offshore, is it Bermuda or Panama, I can't remember, trust, tax avoidance empire that his father built up. How can we have a talk about austerity when the very cause of austerity is our Prime Minister? And yet we talk about everything else. The discussion's being dragged into the wrong direction about the things we're going to do, and we're not addressing the fundamental problems, which is always going to be inequality. So the only way you're going to get rid of that is you have to make sure that every one of us is willing to sign a contract to you. And so you know what we actually mean. There must be at least 5, 6 things that any one of us is willing to say, no, I will definitely commit to supporting that policy. Not one of us can say we are going to make the NHS properly funded, because we don't know what conflict's going to happen. There could be a war, there could be some kind of earthquake. We can't guarantee shorter waiting times, but we can guarantee that we would put more of the GDP towards that, to funding it. We can guarantee that we're going to not charge doctors for their training if they stay in the UK for 5 years afterwards, which is I think one of the UKIP policies. I love a load of those policies, but I'm willing to sign to them. That's the difference. I'm willing to sign some UKIP policies. I'm willing to sign to some Green policies. I've seen some really, really good ideas, but I want to see them actually carried out, and I want you to demand the right to see them carried out.
Thank you, Kaz. John.
I can assure you that I have always been a very attentive and full-time MP, and if elected again, I will continue to be so. The service I offer is comprehensive statements on my website, something written daily, setting out my views and thoughts, how I'm tackling problems. I answer emails usually by return personally, 7 days a week. And the Liberal Democrat candidate, of course, is the only candidate in this election. who wants 2 jobs at the public expense on the same day on May the 7th, because he is both standing for the Borough Council for a remunerated position and standing for Parliament, another remunerated position. So I'm not quite sure how he thinks he can be both a Borough Councillor and, well, maybe there's more than one, but the Labour Party candidate didn't make an issue of it, but the Liberal has. And I can assure the Liberal Democrat candidate of one thing, that I have looked at the opportunity of standing for election to the Borough Council because it would help do my job, and decided it is quite impossible because of the conflict of hours and times over debates and meetings and votes. So I leave him with that thought. But I would like the privilege of representing you again. I have a lot of open files in my closed office in Westminster. If you re-elected me, I could pick up those files and work again on flooding and housing and planning and road noise, where we've made some progress but not enough. And I would like to pick up my national campaigns. I've managed to talk to you about 1 or 2 on banking, getting out of poverty, and on Europe. But there is a third one that I've been running, which my party has now responded to, which is Justice for England. That is why I wear a red tie and a white shirt tonight, not because I suddenly defected to the Socialists, but because I wish to highlight the case for England and justice for England. And if you elect me your MP, I will be speaking for Wokingham and speaking for England. I will be speaking for justice for Wokingham and justice for England. I want things to be better. I want people out of poverty. I want great education, great services. Let me be your voice.
Thank you very much. No applause. Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks very much, everyone, for asking some really good questions and for listening to the answers. It's a privilege to stand up here, I'm sure the others will agree, and to try and interpret our party policies in the best way we can. I always think, I wish I'd said that when I answer a question. You can always think of a better answer later. So the answers that we give you are not full answers. There isn't enough time. I've forgotten what I was going to say now, but never mind. So thanks for everyone for listening, and don't forget to vote, even if you don't vote Green. Though I'd rather you did vote Green. Don't forget to vote on May the 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. And Andy.
Thank you. I'm very conscious that for the whole evening we've been pointing this way, so I would like to say, guys, I'm really sorry you've had our backs all evening, but I'm going to go back to the front. I had a bit of spiel here about Labour's 6 pledges, but given the banter which has occurred just now, I thought I would go away from that. People have asked me on the doorstep in Shinfield North, where I'm standing, could you be a councillor and a member of Parliament at the same time? And I have said yes, because I think if you were a borough councillor and an MP, it would keep you grounded in your community, and it would perhaps stop you passing some of the sort of daft legislation that we have seen this government put through. If you were a borough councillor, you would not be passing things like the bedroom tax and hitting disabled people. John has mentioned the votes. Well, the last time I checked at Wokingham Borough Council, there was a fairly hefty majority, and the idea that John would not be able to come back down or would be needed back in Wokingham to pass some votes is probably not worth considering. You are welcome to apply to the Socialist Party, John. I will put in a neutral word for you because I've met you. I'm not sure what our actual approval procedures are, but I have a feeling that they might be suspicious of your intentions. But as I said, you are welcome. So that's taking me to the end. We need to think very, very carefully about the sort of MP we elect. If we are not very, very careful, we will elect an MP who will take us down a course which will take the UK out of the European Union. And perhaps worse for me, we will elect an MP whose policies and whose obsessions will lead us to break up the United Kingdom. I don't know about you, I was terrified in September, absolutely terrified when it looked like Scotland would leave us. If we push them too far, they will leave us, and we will be a much, much poorer nation, and we will be a much, much poorer town for it. We need to elect an MP who has a positive vision of the future and not a selfish, inward-looking vision.
Thank you very much, Andy. Well, we come to the end of our evening in the formal sense now, and I just would like to say thanks. I want to say thank you, first of all, to you all coming and being here tonight. And I want to really encourage you to go away from here to discuss these issues and things that you've heard with other people, and to, more than anything, to encourage participation, because we are so privileged to live in a democracy, and we need to make sure that we take hold of that and we participate in politics. So that is really, really important. I want to thank Rose Street, particularly here, for hosting us tonight. Thank you for your hospitality, for looking after us so well, for the technical team and everything that's happened tonight. We really appreciate that. I also want to thank the organising group who have worked very hard behind the scenes, not just tonight organising questions, but coordinating this evening and planning it. We really appreciate you facilitating that for us. And of course I want to thank our 6 candidates here this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to share with us. Thank you for sharing from your hearts what you feel and what you believe to be right. We appreciate that. Thank you for your discipline in largely sticking to the clock. That's been good. And we do want to say, I think I can speak on behalf of the churches and many in our community to say that we really appreciate your willingness to serve, and that we want to bless you and we want to pray for you. And whoever of you is elected, we will continue to pray for you, and we will want to work together with you, because as Christians and people of goodwill in this community, we want to see the best for our town and our nation, and we want to work together with people on that. So please do know that churches are praying for you and praying for this election as we come up to it. And I do just want to thank as well, not just potential MPs, but has been highlighted, there are other local elections going on at this time too, and we recognise those who serve amongst us in those ways. So thank you to everyone. I am now going to give you permission to applaud, and you can release all that energy into applauding to thank our candidates and thank everyone that's been involved tonight. Thank you very much.